I spent most of my morning today just replotting the end of my novel. I ended up having to redo a few scenes, having to kind of rewriting a few different ways I was going to end the story. Just it's still basically the same core idea, but I had to make a few adjustments just because the more I keep writing, the more nuances basically I tend to find in my writing, and the little subtle ways basically of improving the plot. I think that's actually one of the good things about doing this write every day program is that the more you write, especially the slower you write, the more you can kind of bring out your story. It's a bit like a painting almost, where you start obviously with the initial draft, and then you keep on doing layers and layers and layers, and the more in writing slow, and oftentimes is like bringing out more and more layers, because if you spend several days on just one scene, what you're doing basically is you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the scene, to the characters and the emotions, and these little ideas tend to sprout from that. These little additional subplots, these little just little additional things that tend to make your story a bit richer, right? It's the depth basically that tends to make things a bit more interesting. And so today I was just reevaluating what I initially had plotted for the ending there, and just ended up rewriting out my scenes. Again, it's like 90% the same. It's just a little bit of some different causalities that lead to different things in the story. So as you can see, most of this video here is just me at my desk, just basically plotting out the rest of the story on little flashcards. Uh, that tends to be how I plot my stories. I can do a bigger video on that again sometime, but for the most part, when it comes to especially like the final act of my stories, I usually will just plot out scene by scene what needs to happen, who the main point of view character is, and just the general notes of what needs to be in there. And then from there, I go into the story basically, and I just start kind of writing around with those elements in mind. Wow. And just as like an aside, I'm looking at my looking at my office right now in this video here, and seeing basically that, you can you can kind of see some of the clutter behind my office chair there, my typewriter that's on the floor there, some record players, the photo there leaning up against my stereo system. I keep telling myself one of these days I'm gonna clean my office up. Admittedly, I don't really dress up too much in my office, but it's definitely not usually this clean. What we usually see basically with like a nice clean desk with the little trinkets and all that stuff standing around. Things aren't usually that no, things aren't normally that decluttered. I tend to kind of clean things up obviously for the YouTube channel, but yeah, my office is complete clutter. I do have to clean that up at some point. But I'm gonna cut now quickly to just some quick footage of myself writing here when I got into my writing session a little bit later in the day. Admittedly, this was a very kind of a low word count day, partly because I spent some time doing a lot of plotting early on, and also I have kind of some appointments to run this afternoon. But I guess the main reason why the word count was so low is this happened to be one of those days where you spend a lot of time fussing over a very small thing, which I guess maybe that's always what writing is. But I spent most of my writing session trying to come up with something unique to a motel room. So, just someone, the main character basically, one of the main characters is in a motel room, basically staying there, and I was just trying to find something that happened to be somewhat unique to that room, something that wouldn't fit the normal sort of the typical things that you might find, right? Something that really ends up standing out there. So I spent a good amount of time just thinking about that. There's actually I think a clip basically of me surfing the web at one point coming up here, where I took a bit of a pause in the writing just to kind of research images basically of different motel rooms basically, and trying to figure out what the exact what will make this room distinct. I was trying to find something that was both something that was both really disgusting for a motel room, but also something surprising that you might find in a like kind of a lower class motel room, right? So something disgusting, obviously, it can be anything. The first thing that come to mind, obviously, right, are like not clean carpets. You see bed bugs. The sheets have stains on 'em or something like that, right? That's very kind of like, again, like I always talk about, like the first things that come to mind, your first immediate thoughts when you think of a disgusting motel room. And so I wanted to go deeper, and I wanted to find something that would be really distinct to a room, basically, something basically that would not be of your normal, but would suggest it's low class, and something that would stand out, and then something surprising that might be of interest. Something surprising that might not, that you might not expect. Basically, I ended up going with the disgusting thing was actually just the motel curtains, and I went and described basically how that they were the sort, basically, that were on the rollers, like the like little stick that hangs out on these motels, right? And you use the rollers to pull, you use like the little stick to move them back and forth. And I described the frustration with the rollers not working, like the fact that the curtains got caught like on the rolling machine. You had to really put some effort into closing them. I ended up going with that. I'm not sure if that's the best. I wasn't sure if that was like the best thing or not. And then for the interesting thing, like the cool sort of the cool, interesting, the thing you didn't expect, the nice perk, basically, it ended up being the bathtub. The bathtub basically was this nice kind of wider shouldered one that had some had some elbow room, basically, that you could kind of relax in. So that's something you wouldn't expect in a bad motel. You usually expect this really cramped, little tight, sort of thing. So that's what I went. I'm not sure if that was the best thing or not. You can see me on YouTube right now, basically looking up, like looking up these parody videos, basically, of motels right now. You can see me like searching, just trying to come up basically with ideas of what would be, what motels might have that would not be. The typical things, basically, in trying to find that little nugget there, and that's what I went with, the curtains in the bathtub. So just that was most of my writings. Good amount of time my writing session was just looking at that, and then going back and kind of flipping back and forth between my writing and coming up with this idea before finally settling with that. So yeah, curtains and bathtubs, that was my session today. Looking ahead to this week, though, I am really, really excited. I think what I'm going to do is, I'm thinking, and then not tomorrow, but the day after, I'm actually going to try and do like a full 12-hour write-a-thon. I might do it maybe like Pomodoro style, something like that, where maybe like every hour I take like a 10-minute break or something like that, or every like hour and a half I take like a 30-minute break or something. I'll work some way, some sort of system of doing that, but I'm thinking of doing that just for the fun of it. It's one of those things where that's kind of the nice thing about, in all honesty, like sort of doing the sabbatical that I'm on, is that I can kind of play around with different ideas, basically, and it's a fun little thing to do. And yeah, it turns out I've never written probably more than like maybe 6 hours, maybe in a day. So if I can do like a full like 12-hour like session where I'm just completely engaged in it, we'll see how much I get done. I could potentially get a whole lot done. I might just fry my entire brain and be like get halfway through it and be like completely tapped out. We'll see. But again, that's kind of the fun of having a little bit of time off here, is that I can kind of experiment and see if maybe this works, and if it does, perhaps integrate that maybe on a monthly basis, or maybe quarterly, like one day to do that, and we'll see if it works. I'm very much approaching this with a sort of scientist mentality of just go in, try and see what works. Take this time to kind of refine your technique and refine your writing style, and see if something else will work. But yeah, so that'll be it for today. And again, I'll be back in tomorrow. I kind to accommodate this sort of marathon writing thing that I plan on doing. I'm actually gonna be back in most of my any kind of travel appointments for tomorrow. So I'm not sure how much I will get done tomorrow, but like I said, the hope is that the Tuesday day will be when I can kind of get a huge workout day.